Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the marble corridors of the Vatican in 1492, where the most powerful religious position on earth has just been claimed by a man who openly keeps a mistress, proudly acknowledges 4 children, and treats papal vows like a suggested reading list rather than divine commandments. You're watching Rodrigo Borgia, soon to be Pope Alexander VI, navigate the treacherous waters of Renaissance politics with the kind of audacious confidence that would make modern politicians blush. The air around you smells of incense mixed with ambition, and you probably won't survive the cognitive dissonance of learning how the supposed voice of God on earth spent more time in bedchambers than prayer chambers. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in Valencia, Spain, around 1431, witnessing the birth of Rodrigo de Borgia, later Italianized to Borgia, into a family that understood power like a sommelier understands wine. His uncle, Alfonso de Borgia, had already begun climbing church hierarchy with the methodical precision of a spider building its web. The Borgias weren't just ambitious, they were strategic in ways that would make Machiavelli take notes. Young Rodrigo absorbed lessons in manipulation alongside his Latin prayers. You watch him studying canon law at the University of Bologna, but his real education happened in shadowy Vatican corridors, where his uncle Alfonso whispered the secrets of ecclesiastical advancement. By 1455, when Uncle Alfonso became Pope Calixtus III, 24-year-old Rodrigo received his first major appointment, Cardinal Deacon of San Nicola in Carcere. The irony wasn't lost on observers. A man destined to imprison the papacy in scandal held the title of a church named for prison. Historians still argue whether Rodrigo's rapid promotions resulted from genuine ability or nepotistic favoritism, but you witness both at work. He possessed remarkable administrative skills and diplomatic charm that could convince enemies to become allies over dinner. Yet his uncle's papal ring certainly opened doors that might have remained locked for less connected candidates. The young cardinal's appetite for life became legendary even before his papal election. You observe him hosting lavish parties in his Roman palazzo, where beautiful women moved through candlelit chambers like exotic birds in gilded cages. Unlike other clerics who conducted affairs discreetly, Rodrigo flaunted his romantic conquests with theatrical boldness. He seemed to view celibacy as an optional suggestion rather than a sacred vow, an attitude that would define his entire ecclesiastical career. Venice's ambassador once reported watching Cardinal Borgia dance until dawn at a celebration, surrounded by courtesans whose jewelry rivaled the Vatican's treasury. The scene epitomized Renaissance, Italy's complex relationship with religious authority, publicly devout, privately indulgent, and perpetually negotiating the space between sacred duty and human desire. You witness Rodrigo's transformation from ambitious young cleric to seasoned political operator. He learned to speak multiple languages fluently, mastered the art of strategic gift-giving, and developed networks of allies that stretched from Spanish courts to Italian city-states. His palazzo became a diplomatic hub where deals were struck over wine and women, creating a template he would later implement on a much grander scale. By the time Pope Innocent VIII died in 1492, Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia had spent nearly 4 decades perfecting the delicate balance between spiritual authority and temporal power. You sense the anticipation crackling through Rome as cardinals gathered for the papal conclave, each knowing that this election would determine not just the Church's future, but the political landscape of Italy itself. You're now standing in the Sistine Chapel during August 1492, watching one of history's most brazenly corrupt papal elections unfold like a Renaissance auction, where souls serve as currency. The air feels thick with conspiracy as 23 cardinals gather to choose Christianity's earthly representative. But the process resembles a high-stakes poker game more than divine selection. Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia moves through the sacred space with predatory confidence, his Spanish accent carrying promises that sound suspiciously like bribes to anyone listening carefully. The election should have been decided by prayer and divine inspiration, but you witness Borgia's campaign operating with corporate efficiency. He's distributed a detailed list of rewards to potential supporters. Cardinal Ascanio Sforza would receive the lucrative position of Vice-Chancellor plus Borgia's Roman palace. Cardinal Giuliano della Rovere could expect significant benefices, and Cardinal Giovanni Battista Orsini would gain profitable church appointments for his family members. The irony strikes you immediately. The man seeking St. Peter's throne was conducting business like a medieval car salesman. Historians still argue whether Borgia's victory resulted from superior organization or outright bribery, but contemporary accounts suggest both factors played crucial roles. You observe him meeting privately with undecided cardinals, his hands gesturing expressively as he outlines the mutual benefits of his papacy. Unlike other candidates who relied on traditional alliances, Borgia offered tangible rewards that addressed each cardinal's specific desires. The voting process itself unfolds with theatrical drama. You watch as ballots are cast in elaborate ceremonies designed to invoke divine guidance, yet political calculations dominate every decision. Borgia's supporters move through the chapel like seasoned campaign managers, quietly confirming commitments and identifying potential defectors. The Spanish cardinal's confidence never wavers, even when early ballots show competitive results. On August 11th, after 3 days of intense negotiations, you witness the moment that would scandalize Christendom for centuries. The ballots are counted, and Rodrigo Borgia has achieved the necessary 2/3 majority. At 61 years old, this Spanish cardinal with acknowledged mistresses and children becomes Pope Alexander VI. The announcement echoes through the Sistine Chapel with surreal absurdity. A man who violated core clerical vows now holds Christianity's highest office. The immediate aftermath reveals the transaction's true nature. Cardinal Sforza receives his promised rewards within days, including Borgia's opulent palace and the powerful vice-chancellor position. Other supporters collect their promised benefices with businesslike efficiency. You're witnessing the transformation of the papacy into a family enterprise where spiritual authority serves temporal ambitions. European courts react with mixtures of shock and calculated acceptance. France's King Charles VIII expresses diplomatic congratulations while privately questioning the election's legitimacy. Spain's monarchs celebrate having a Spanish pope, but worry about Alexander's notorious reputation preceding him to St. Peter's throne. Venice's diplomatic reports describe the new pope as energetic and worldly, Renaissance euphemisms for scandalous behavior. The coronation ceremony on August 26th provides spectacular theater. You observe Alexander VI receiving the papal tiara with ceremonies that have sanctified popes for centuries. Yet this particular installation feels different. The new pope's family members occupy prominent positions during the celebration, including several beautiful women whose relationships to His Holiness remain diplomatically unspecified in official records. Alexander's first papal decisions reveal his priorities immediately. Rather than addressing church reform or spiritual renewal, he focuses on securing positions for family members and consolidating political power. You watch him appointing relatives to crucial posts while negotiating alliances that serve Borgia interests rather than Christian unity. The Vatican begins its transformation from spiritual center to family headquarters. The broader implications become clear as you observe reactions across Italy. This papal election represents more than individual corruption. It symbolizes the Renaissance, Church's complete entanglement with temporal power. Alexander VI's victory demonstrates that money, political connections, and strategic alliances matter more than spiritual qualifications or moral authority in selecting Christianity's supreme leader. You're now entering the world of Vanazza dei Catene around 1470, where you encounter a woman whose beauty and intelligence would captivate a future pope for over 2 decades. She moves through Rome's bustling streets with the confidence of someone who understands her own power, her dark eyes reflecting ambitions that extend far beyond conventional feminine roles of the era. The irony would be amusing if it weren't so historically significant. This innkeeper's daughter from Mantua would become more influential than most European queens, all through her relationship with a man sworn to celibacy. Vanazza possessed the kind of magnetism that Renaissance artists spent careers trying to capture on canvas. You observe her in her prime, probably around 25, with olive skin that seemed to glow in candlelight, and an intellect sharp enough to navigate Rome's treacherous social currents. Unlike the passive mistresses typically associated with powerful men, Vanazza engaged actively in business, politics, and social maneuvering that would make modern power couples take notes. Her relationship with Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia began sometime in the 1470s, developing into a partnership that transcended simple romantic attraction. You witness their early encounters at Roman social gatherings, where Vanoz's wit matched Borgia's charisma in conversations that lasted well into dawn. She understood instinctively that survival in Renaissance Rome required more than physical beauty. It demanded strategic thinking and the ability to anticipate political shifts before they occurred. The couple's domestic arrangements defied every convention of clerical behavior. Rather than conducting a discreet affair hidden from public view, Borgia and Vanoza established a semi-official household that functioned like a Renaissance marriage in everything but legal status. You observe them entertaining guests together, making joint business decisions, and raising their children with the kind of parental collaboration that was remarkably progressive for the 15th century. Their first child, Cesare, arrived around 1475, followed by Juan in 1476, Lucrezia in 1480, and Geoffrey in 1482. Historians still argue whether all four children were definitely Borgia's biological offspring, but paternity mattered less than public acknowledgement. You watch Rodrigo proudly presenting his children to Roman society, completely abandoning any pretense of celibate priesthood. The scandal wasn't just the relationship, it was the brazen publicity surrounding their family life. Vanoza demonstrated remarkable business acumen that complemented her romantic relationship with Borgia. You observe her managing several profitable Roman inns and taverns, accumulating property that provided financial independence, rare among women of her era. She understood that relying solely on a lover's generosity, even a cardinal's, represented dangerous vulnerability in a world where political fortunes changed faster than Roman weather. The fascinating aspect of their relationship was its apparent emotional authenticity alongside obvious political benefits. Contemporary accounts describe genuine affection between Borgia and Vanoza that persisted even after his papal election introduced new complications. You witness tender moments between them that suggest their bond transcended mere convenience or physical attraction, a Renaissance love story conducted in the shadow of the Vatican. When Rodrigo became Pope Alexander VI in 1492, Vanoza's position became simultaneously more powerful and more precarious. You observe her navigating the complex etiquette of being a pope's acknowledged mistress, a role without historical precedent or established protocols. She couldn't appear at official papal functions, yet everyone in Rome understood her continued influence over Alexander's personal decisions. Vanoza's intelligence showed most clearly in how she managed the transition when Alexander's attention shifted to younger women. Rather than becoming a discarded mistress, she maintained cordial relationships with both the Pope and his newer romantic interests. You watch her hosting dinner parties where Alexander's various lovers socialized with diplomatic grace that would impress modern political wives. Her children's careers became Vanoza's primary focus during Alexander's papacy. she actively participated in negotiations for their marriages, military appointments, and political positions, functioning as an unofficial papal advisor on family matters. The irony was perfect, a pope's mistress wielding influence over appointments that affected all of Christendom. Vanaz's legacy extended beyond her famous relationship to encompass her role as a Renaissance businesswoman and political figure. You observe her final years managing extensive property holdings while maintaining social connections that outlasted her romantic relationship with Alexander. She died in 1518, nearly 2 decades after their affair ended, having successfully transformed temporary romantic power into lasting social and economic influence. You're witnessing one of history's most audacious acts of papal nepotism, as Pope Alexander VI openly acknowledges and aggressively promotes his 4 children, treating the Vatican like a family business where blood relations trump spiritual qualifications. The sight would be comedic if the implications weren't so profound. The supposed celibate voice of God on earth, proudly introducing his offspring to European diplomats, while completely ignoring centuries of church doctrine about priestly celibacy. Cesare Borgia, born around 1475, emerges as perhaps the most fascinating and terrifying of Alexander's children. You observe him in his early 20s, possessing his father's charisma, combined with ruthless ambition that would inspire Machiavelli's The Prince. Unlike typical Renaissance nobles who inherited their positions, Cesare had to create his own path to power, making him simultaneously more dangerous and more innovative than his contemporaries. His intelligence was matched only by his willingness to eliminate obstacles through methods that made experienced condottieri nervous. Initially designated for ecclesiastical career like many second sons, Cesare received rapid church promotions that showcased papal favoritism at its most blatant. You watch Alexander appointing his teenage son as Archbishop of Valencia, then Cardinal, positions that typically required decades of theological study and pastoral experience. The appointments caused diplomatic incidents across Europe, with French and Spanish courts privately questioning whether the papacy had become a hereditary monarchy disguised as spiritual authority. Juan Borgia, born around 1476, represented his father's attempt to establish secular nobility for the family name. You observe Alexander lavishing military titles and wealthy estates on his second son, apparently grooming Juan as the Borgia dynasty's temporal leader, while Cesare handled ecclesiastical advancement. The strategy reflected sophisticated long-term planning, creating parallel power structures that could support each other across both religious and political spheres. Juan's personality proved less suited to the ambitious roles his father envisioned. Unlike Cesare's calculating intelligence, Juan displayed the kind of arrogant recklessness that often accompanies inherited privilege without earned competence. You witness him making strategic mistakes that frustrated Alexander's carefully laid plans, creating tensions within the family that would eventually prove fatal. His mysterious murder in 1497 remains one of Renaissance Rome's most compelling unsolved crimes. Lucrezia Borgia, born in 1480, became her father's most valuable diplomatic asset through strategic marriages that sealed political alliances across Italy. You observe her transformation from papal daughter to political pawn, though she possessed enough intelligence and charm to influence her circumstances rather than merely endure them. Unlike women of her era who remained passive in marriage negotiations, Lucrezia actively participated in discussions about her romantic future, demonstrating the Borgia family's unconventional approach to gender roles. Her first marriage at age 13 to Giovanni Sforza created an alliance with Milan that served Alexander's immediate political needs. But you witness the union's annulment when those needs changed. The divorce proceedings became spectacularly public scandals involving accusations of impotence and non-consummation that entertained Roman gossips for months. Lucrezia's subsequent marriages to Alfonso of Aragon and later Alfonso d'Este of Ferrara followed similar patterns of political convenience disguised as romantic arrangements. Historians still argue whether the infamous rumors about incestuous relationships between Lucrezia and her father or brothers had any factual basis. But you observe how these allegations became powerful weapons in political warfare. Enemies of the Borgia family circulated increasingly elaborate stories about papal orgies and family improprieties that probably contained more imagination than truth. Yet they damaged the family's reputation for centuries. Fray Borgia, the youngest son born around 1482, remained somewhat peripheral to his father's grand ambitions, but still received significant benefits from papal favoritism. You watch Alexander arranging Geoffrey's marriage to Sancha of Aragon, creating another useful political alliance while ensuring his youngest child's financial security. Geoffrey's relative obscurity in historical records suggests he may have been the most psychologically healthy member of his extraordinary family. The children's collective impact on Alexander's papacy was transformative and ultimately destructive. You observe how their needs, ambitions, and scandals consistently overshadowed spiritual responsibilities that should have dominated papal attention. European courts began treating Vatican diplomacy as Borgia family negotiations rather than church policy, fundamentally altering how the papacy functioned in international relations. The broader implications become clear as you witness reactions across Christendom. These papal children represented visible proof that the Church's highest office had become completely secularized, operated by a man who prioritized family advancement over spiritual leadership. Their very existence challenged core assumptions about papal authority and divine appointment that had sustained medieval Christianity for centuries. You're now exploring the Vatican Palace during Alexander VI's papacy, where sacred corridors that once echoed with prayer now resonate with laughter, music, and the rustle of silk gowns, as the Pope transforms Christianity's holiest residence into his family's private compound. The transformation would be breathtaking if it weren't so blasphemous. Papal apartments that housed centuries of celibate pontiffs now accommodate mistresses, children, and dinner parties that make Renaissance nobles seem conservative by comparison. Alexander's renovation of the papal apartments reflects his complete abandonment of traditional clerical lifestyle. You observe workmen installing luxurious furnishings that prioritize comfort and entertainment over spiritual contemplation. Tapestries depicting mythological love scenes replace religious imagery in private chambers, while the Pope's bedroom receives decorative upgrades that clearly anticipate female companionship. The irony strikes you immediately. The successor to Saint Peter is redecorating Christ's earthly headquarters to facilitate romantic encounters. The Borgia apartments, as they become known, showcase Renaissance artistry at its most sensual and politically charged. You witness Pinturicchio's frescoes transforming papal walls into celebrations of both Christian theology and Borgia family mythology, creating visual narratives that blend sacred and secular themes with audacious creativity. The artwork includes portraits of Vanosa dei Catenay and other papal mistresses disguised as saints and biblical figures, an artistic joke that amused Alexander while scandalizing visitors. Daily life in Alexander's Vatican resembles a royal court more than a religious institution. You observe the Pope's children moving freely through papal chambers, treating the Vatican like their family palace rather than Christendom's spiritual center. Cesare discusses military campaigns in rooms where previous popes meditated on scripture, while Lucrezia hosts female friends in apartments traditionally reserved for male ecclesiastics and diplomatic meetings. The Pope's dining arrangements reveal his priorities with uncomfortable clarity. You witness elaborate banquets in papal halls where beautiful women serve as both entertainment and companions, their presence openly acknowledged rather than discreetly hidden. Alexander's dinner conversations blend theological discussions with romantic banter, creating an atmosphere that would make medieval saints weep, while Renaissance humanists applaud the integration of earthly and spiritual concerns. Security arrangements around the Vatican adapt to accommodate Alexander's unconventional lifestyle. You observe guards who understand their duties include protecting papal mistresses and children alongside traditional ecclesiastical officials. The Swiss Guard, established to defend papal sovereignty, finds itself escorting women to secret papal rendezvous and managing discreet entrances that allow romantic visitors to avoid public scrutiny while maintaining plausible deniability. Historians still argue whether Alexander's Vatican parties included the legendary orgies described by contemporary critics, but you witness enough unconventional entertainment to understand why rumors flourished. The Pope's celebrations featured dancing, gambling, and theatrical performances that pushed boundaries of acceptable clerical behavior. Even if specific scandal allegations were exaggerated, the general atmosphere clearly violated every expectation of papal propriety. Vatican's transformation affected its function as a diplomatic center in ways that amused some ambassadors while horrifying others. You observe foreign envoys adapting their protocols to acknowledge the Pope's family members, who wielded unofficial but significant influence over papal decisions. Diplomatic wives found themselves socializing with papal mistresses at functions that blurred traditional distinctions between sacred and secular authority. Business meetings in Alexander's Vatican often occurred in settings that would make modern executives uncomfortable. You witness the Pope conducting church affairs, while beautiful women provided musical entertainment or simply decorative presents that enhanced his enjoyment of administrative duties. The mixing of pleasure with papal responsibilities created an atmosphere unique in Vatican history. The psychological impact on Vatican staff ranged from scandalized horror to adaptive acceptance. You observe longtime church officials struggling to reconcile their spiritual vocation with daily exposure to behavior that contradicted everything they'd been taught about clerical life. Younger staff members, however, seemed to adapt more easily to the Pope's revolutionary approach to papal lifestyle. The broader implications become apparent as you witness reactions from visiting church officials and foreign dignitaries. Alexander's Vatican represented visible proof that the papacy had become completely secularized, operated according to Renaissance court customs rather than spiritual principles. The transformation challenged fundamental assumptions about papal authority and divine appointment that had sustained Catholic hierarchy for over a millennium. You're observing the chessboard of Renaissance Italian politics, where 13-year-old Lucrezia Borgia serves as her father's most valuable game piece. Her marriages and divorces orchestrated with the precision of military campaigns designed to advance papal ambitions across the Italian peninsula. The scene would be tragically romantic if it weren't so calculatedly political watching. A teenage girl's romantic destiny determined by shifting alliances between city-states whose loyalty changed faster than Roman fashion trends. Lucrezia's first marriage in 1493 to Giovanni Sforza, Lord of Pesaro, creates an immediate alliance between Pope Alexander VI and the powerful Sforza family of Milan. You witness the elaborate wedding celebrations in the Vatican Palace, where 13-year-old Lucrezia exchanges vows with her 26-year-old husband, while her father beams with satisfaction at securing Milanese support for his political objectives. The ceremony blends religious solemnity with diplomatic necessity, creating a template for how the Borgias would use family relationships as instruments of statecraft. The marriage quickly becomes a casualty of changing political circumstances. When Alexander's alliance with Milan no longer serves papal interests, you observe the Pope maneuvering to dissolve his daughter's union with ruthless efficiency. The annulment proceedings become spectacularly public scandals involving accusations that Giovanni Sforza was impotent, and the marriage had never been consummated claims that allowed Catholic Church law to declare the union invalid from its inception. Giovanni Sforza's reaction to these accusations provides dark comedy amid serious political maneuvering. Rather than accept the impotence allegations quietly, he publicly declares his sexual competence while suggesting that Alexander wanted Lucrezia available for his own incestuous purposes. You witness these scandalous counter-accusations spreading through Italian courts like wildfire, creating gossip that entertained nobles while damaging Borgia family reputation across Europe. Historians still argue whether the incest allegations against Alexander and Lucrezia contained any factual basis, but the rumors demonstrate how personal scandals became weapons in Renaissance political warfare. You observe how enemies of the Borgia family weaponized these stories to undermine papal authority, while supporters dismissed them as malicious propaganda designed to discredit a successful Spanish pope. Lucrezia's second marriage in 1498 to Alfonso of Aragon, Duke of Bisegli, represents Alexander's attempt to secure alliance with the Kingdom of Naples, while providing his daughter with a more personally satisfying relationship. You witness genuine affection developing between the 18-year-old Lucrezia and her 17-year-old husband, creating one of the few authentic romantic connections in her strategically orchestrated love life. Happiness proves tragically brief when political circumstances again intervene in Lucrezia's personal relationships. You observe growing tensions between Alfonso and Cesare Borgia, whose military ambitions conflict with Aragonese interests in southern Italy. The situation deteriorates rapidly when Alfonso becomes an obstacle to Cesare's territorial expansion plans, making him expendable in the larger scheme of Borgia family advancement. Alfonso's mysterious death in 1500, officially attributed to unknown assassins, but widely suspected to involve Cesare Borgia, traumatizes Lucrezia while advancing her family's political objectives. You witness her genuine grief contrasting sharply with her father and brother's immediate focus on arranging her next strategically advantageous marriage. The contrast illustrates the fundamental tension between personal happiness and political necessity that defined Renaissance noble life. Lucrezia's third and final marriage in 1502 to Alfonso d'Este, heir to the Duchy of Ferrara, represents Alexander's masterpiece of matrimonial diplomacy. You observe elaborate negotiations involving dowries, territorial concessions, and military alliances that make the wedding resemble a corporate merger more than a romantic union. The Este family's initial reluctance to accept a papal bastard as daughter-in-law gradually yields to Alexander's combination of generous incentives and subtle threats. This final marriage proves personally and politically successful in ways that surprised contemporary observers. You witness Lucrezia developing into an effective duchess who governs Ferrara competently while maintaining diplomatic relationships that benefit both her husband's duchy and her family's broader interests. Her transformation from papal pawn to accomplished ruler demonstrates personal resilience that transcended the political machinations surrounding her romantic life. The broader implications of Lucrezia's marriages become clear as you observe their impact on Italian politics and papal authority. These strategic unions demonstrate how Alexander VI completely abandoned spiritual leadership in favor of temporal power, treating the papacy as a family business where children's marriages served institutional advancement rather than pastoral care for Christian souls. You're now following Cesare Borgia through the blood-soaked landscape of early 16th century Italy, where papal authority serves as a launching pad for personal conquest, and sibling rivalry turns deadly in ways that make modern political scandals seem like polite disagreements. The scene unfolds with operatic drama as you watch Christianity's most ruthless papal son transform ecclesiastical privilege into military power, leaving a trail of bodies and broken alliances that would inspire Machiavelli's most cynical observations about power and morality. Cesare's transition from cardinal to warlord represents one of history's most audacious career changes. You observe him renouncing his ecclesiastical positions in 1498 to pursue secular ambitions, becoming the first person ever to resign from the College of Cardinals, a decision that scandalized church officials while exciting military strategists across Italy. His father Alexander VI supports this unprecedented move by providing papal armies and treasury funds to finance his son's territorial ambitions, completely abandoning any pretense of spiritual priorities. The French alliance that Cesare negotiates demonstrates his sophisticated understanding of European power dynamics. You witness him securing military support from King Louis XII by arranging beneficial marriages and territorial concessions that serve French interests in Italy while advancing Borgia expansion plans. The deal includes Cesare's marriage to Charlotte d'Albret, sister of the King of Navarre, creating family connections that legitimize his transition from churchman to nobleman. Cesare's military campaigns across central Italy unfold with brutal efficiency that terrifies established rulers while impressing professional soldiers. You observe his systematic conquest of papal territories, where he eliminates local lords who had governed these regions for generations with hereditary authority. His methods combine diplomatic negotiation with sudden violence, creating a reputation that made enemies surrender rather than risk the consequences of resistance. The mysterious death of Juan Borgia in 1497 remains one of Renaissance Rome's most compelling unsolved murders, but contemporary observers strongly suspected fraternal jealousy and ambition motivated the crime. You witness the immediate aftermath of Juan's assassination, where Cesare's unconvincing grief contrasts sharply with his rapid assumption of his brother's military responsibilities and territorial holdings. The timing suggests calculated fratricide designed to eliminate competition for their father's favor and resources. Alexander VI's reaction to Juan's death reveals the complex dynamics within the Borgia family. You observe the Pope's genuine anguish over losing his favored son, gradually transforming into acceptance of Cessair as the family's military leader and political heir. This transition demonstrates how personal tragedy became strategic opportunity in the ruthless world of Renaissance Italian politics, where survival required adapting quickly to changing circumstances. Cessair's treatment of conquered territories showcases both administrative competence and terrifying cruelty. You witness him establishing effective governments in captured cities, while simultaneously eliminating potential rivals through methods that ranged from legal execution to mysterious disappearances. His ability to inspire both loyalty and fear among subordinates created military effectiveness that impressed contemporary observers while horrifying moralists. The famous incident at Senigallia in 1502, where Cessair eliminated several allied condottieri through elaborate deception, demonstrates his mastery of political betrayal. You observe him inviting supposed allies to a celebration, then systematically murdering them once they were isolated and vulnerable. The massacre shocked even hardened Renaissance politicians, while establishing Cessair's reputation as someone whose friendship was as dangerous as his enmity. Historians still argue whether Cessair's military achievements justified his brutal methods, but you witness the immediate results of his campaigns, transforming central Italy's political landscape. His conquests created the largest unified territory the region had seen since ancient Rome, suggesting that his vision extended beyond personal aggrandizement to encompass genuine state-building objectives that might have benefited Italian unification. The psychological portrait that emerges from observing Cessair reveals a man of extraordinary contradictions. You witness moments of genuine charm and intellectual brilliance, alternating with displays of casual cruelty that suggest profound moral detachment. His ability to compartmentalize violence and diplomacy made him effective in Renaissance power politics, while raising questions about the psychological costs of such extreme pragmatism. Cessair's relationship with his father Alexander becomes increasingly complex as papal resources strain under the financial demands of constant warfare. You observe tensions developing between the Pope's spiritual responsibilities and his son's military ambitions, creating conflicts that foreshadow the Borgia family's eventual downfall when Alexander's death removes their primary source of institutional support. The broader implications of Cessair's career become apparent as you witness reactions across Europe to a papal son's transformation into a conquering warlord. His success challenges fundamental assumptions about church authority and the separation between spiritual and temporal power, demonstrating how Renaissance political realities had completely overwhelmed medieval concepts of papal leadership. You're witnessing the arrival of 20-year-old Giulia Farnese at the papal court in 1489, where her ethereal beauty immediately captures the attention of Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia and sets in motion a scandalous relationship that will continue throughout his papacy and fundamentally alter the dynamics of Vatican politics. The scene unfolds with all the drama of a Renaissance soap opera as you observe this young woman from minor nobility, transforming into one of the most powerful figures in Christendom through the simple expedient of catching a future pope's roving eye. Giulia's background provides fascinating insight into how ambitious families navigated Renaissance social hierarchies. You observe her emerging from the relatively modest Farnese clan, whose members understood that feminine beauty could serve as effectively as military conquest in advancing family fortunes. Her marriage to Orsino Orsini was arranged to create useful political connections, but the union quickly became secondary to her relationship with the influential Spanish cardinal, who would soon become Pope Alexander VI. The timing of Giulia's entrance into Borgia's life creates additional layers of scandal and complexity. You witness this new romantic entanglement developing, while Vanazza de Catenay, mother of his 4 acknowledged children, still maintains her position as primary papal mistress. The situation would challenge modern relationship counselors, yet somehow both women manage to coexist within Alexander's complicated domestic arrangements without apparent major conflicts. Contemporary observers struggled to find appropriate terminology for Giulia's unique position within papal hierarchy. You observe diplomats and church officials creating euphemistic descriptions: the Pope's daughter, His Holiness's spiritual advisee, or simply La Bella Giulia. That allowed them to acknowledge her obvious influence while maintaining diplomatic fiction about papal celibacy. The linguistic gymnastics required to discuss her presence became an art form in itself. Giulia's physical beauty apparently transcended typical Renaissance standards to achieve legendary status among contemporary observers. You witness papal visitors describing her golden hair, perfect complexion, and graceful movements in terms usually reserved for religious artwork depicting divine figures. The irony was perfect. A pope's mistress inspired descriptions that made her sound like artistic representations of the Virgin Mary. The financial arrangements surrounding Giulia's position reveal the practical aspects of high-level Renaissance relationships. You observe Alexander VI providing her with extensive properties, jewelry, and annual incomes that rivaled those of European princesses. Her economic independence ensured loyalty, while demonstrating the Pope's commitment to their relationship in ways that transcended mere physical attraction or temporary infatuation. Giulia's influence over papal decisions became a source of considerable diplomatic concern across European courts. You witness foreign ambassadors seeking her intercession on policy matters, effectively treating the Pope's 20-year-old mistress as an unofficial member of his advisory council. Her recommendations apparently carried significant weight in Alexander's decision-making process, creating an unprecedented situation where papal policy was partially determined by bedroom politics. The relationship's longevity surprised contemporary observers, who expected Alexander's attention to shift quickly to newer romantic interests. You observe Giulia maintaining her position as primary papal mistress for nearly a decade, demonstrating remarkable skill at managing both the Pope's affections and the complex social dynamics surrounding her unique role. Her success suggests intelligence and political acumen that complemented her famous physical beauty. Historians still argue whether Julia bore children to Alexander VI, but the question matters less than her obvious emotional importance to the aging pontiff. You witness their relationship displaying genuine affection, alongside obvious political and social benefits, suggesting that their connection transcended mere convenience or mutual exploitation. Their correspondence reveals unexpected tenderness between two people navigating extraordinary circumstances. The broader scandal wasn't just Alexander's relationship with Julia, but the complete abandonment of any pretense regarding papal celibacy that her presence represented. You observe European courts struggling to maintain diplomatic protocols when the Pope's romantic life became as publicly acknowledged as his religious duties. The situation forced a complete reevaluation of how secular authorities related to papal authority, when that authority was exercised by someone who openly violated his most fundamental vows. Julia's brother Alessandro Farnese benefits enormously from her relationship with Alexander, receiving rapid church promotions that would culminate in his own papal election as Paul III decades later. You witness the Pope appointing this young man to increasingly powerful positions based entirely on familial connections to his mistress, creating a pattern of nepotism that made the Borgia family's advancement seem almost modest by comparison. The psychological dynamics between Alexander and Julia reveal fascinating insights into Renaissance concepts of love, power, and aging. You observe a 60-year-old man desperately maintaining his vitality through association with youthful beauty, while a 20-year-old woman navigates the complex responsibilities of wielding influence over the most powerful religious figure in Christendom. Their relationship embodied all the contradictions and possibilities of Renaissance Italian society. You're stepping into the most scandalous allegations surrounding Alexander VI's papacy, where the Vatican allegedly hosted parties that transformed Christianity's holiest spaces into scenes of debauchery that would make ancient Roman emperors blush with envy. The infamous Banquet of Chestnuts on October 30, 1501, represents either the most outrageous papal party in church history or the most effective propaganda campaign ever launched against a sitting pontiff. And you'll probably never know which version contains more truth. Contemporary accounts describe an evening that began as a typical Renaissance dinner party before deteriorating into activities that challenged every assumption about papal propriety. You observe the initial gathering in Alexander's private apartments, where 50 Roman courtesans allegedly joined Vatican officials for what started as elegant entertainment featuring music, dancing, and the kind of sophisticated conversation that characterized Renaissance court culture at its most refined. The chestnuts that gave the party its notorious name supposedly served as props in increasingly elaborate erotic games, where naked courtesans crawled across marble floors collecting the scattered nuts, while papal guests awarded prizes for the most entertaining performances. You witness accounts claiming that Alexander himself participated as both observer and judge, distributing rewards that included church benefices alongside more conventional gifts of jewelry and gold. Historians still argue whether these detailed descriptions represent accurate reporting or malicious fabrication designed to destroy Alexander's reputation. But the allegations spread across Europe with viral efficiency. You observe diplomatic correspondence carrying increasingly elaborate versions of the story, each retelling adding new scandalous details that made previous accounts seem conservative by comparison. The broader pattern of alleged Vatican parties extends beyond single incidents to encompass a systematic transformation of papal entertainment. You witness descriptions of regular gatherings where beautiful women provided various forms of amusement for church officials, creating an atmosphere that resembled Renaissance brothels more than religious institutions. These accounts suggest that Alexander's Vatican operated according to principles that directly contradicted centuries of Christian moral teaching. The reaction across Christendom reveals the profound shock these allegations caused among both religious and secular authorities. You observe church reformers using the scandals as evidence for their arguments about papal corruption, while political enemies of the Borgia family weaponized the stories to undermine Alexander's religious authority and diplomatic effectiveness. The specific details alleged in various accounts of papal parties range from merely inappropriate to absolutely shocking by any historical standard. You witness descriptions of activities that would have scandalized ancient pagans, let alone medieval Christians who viewed their pope as Christ's earthly representative. The contrast between spiritual expectations and alleged reality created cognitive dissonance that reverberated throughout European society. Contemporary sources provide conflicting testimony about these events, with some observers describing elaborate orgies, while others dismiss the allegations as politically motivated character assassination. You observe how the truth became impossible to determine amid the propaganda wars surrounding Alexander's papacy, where facts and fiction blended into historical narratives that served various political agendas. The psychological implications of these allegations, whether accurate or fabricated, reveal important insights into Renaissance attitudes toward power, sexuality, and religious authority. You witness a culture struggling to reconcile humanistic celebration of earthly pleasures with traditional Christian emphasis on spiritual transcendence, creating tensions that found expression in both scandal and scandalous accusations. The impact on Vatican operations became apparent as these stories circulated throughout Europe, forcing papal officials to address allegations that threatened the institutional credibility of the entire Catholic Church. You observe damage control efforts that ranged from outright denial to subtle acknowledgement that certain aspects of papal entertaining might have exceeded appropriate bounds. The broader political context suggests that these scandal allegations served strategic purposes beyond mere gossip or moral outrage. You witness how enemies of the Borgia family used sexual accusations as weapons in larger conflicts over Italian territorial control and European power balances, where destroying papal reputation could advance various political objectives. The long-term consequences of these allegations extended far beyond Alexander's individual papacy to influence centuries of subsequent church history. You observe how Protestant reformers would later use stories about Borgia papal parties as evidence for their arguments about Catholic corruption, making these scandalous accounts part of the historical foundation for religious divisions that continue to affect Christianity today. You're now witnessing the intricate web of political manipulation that Alexander VI weaved across Europe, where papal bulls and family marriages served as instruments of statecraft that made international diplomacy resemble a Renaissance chess game played with human pieces. The complexity would be admirable if it weren't so morally bankrupt. Watching the Pope use spiritual authority to advance temporal ambitions, while treating European monarchs like business partners in elaborate schemes designed to enrich and empower the Borgia family. Alexander's relationship with France provides a masterclass in papal political opportunism. You observe him supporting King Louis XII's claims to Naples and Milan in exchange for French military assistance for Cæsar's Italian campaigns, creating mutually beneficial arrangements that completely ignored the spiritual implications of papal involvement in warfare. The irony strikes you immediately. The Prince of Pieces, earthly representative, actively facilitating military conquest for personal family advancement. The complex negotiations surrounding Cæsar's French marriage reveal Alexander's sophisticated understanding of European power dynamics. You witness papal diplomats arranging not just matrimonial alliance, but comprehensive political packages that included territorial concessions, military support, and ecclesiastical appointments designed to serve multiple Borgia interests simultaneously. The marriage becomes a diplomatic vehicle for advancing papal influence across multiple European courts. Spanish relations with Alexander's papacy demonstrate the complications created when national identity conflicts with institutional loyalty. You observe Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain celebrating having a Spanish pope, while simultaneously worrying about his scandalous reputation, damaging Catholic prestige during their campaigns against Islamic Granada. The monarchs find themselves defending papal behavior they privately condemned, creating diplomatic tensions that persist throughout Alexander's reign. The Italian city-states navigate Alexander's political machinations with varying degrees of success and survival. You witness Venice attempting to maintain neutrality while secretly supporting enemies of Cæsar's military expansion, Florence desperately seeking papal protection from hostile neighbors, and Naples shifting allegiances faster than Mediterranean weather patterns. Each political entity must balance traditional respect for papal authority against practical concerns about Borgia territorial ambitions. Alexander's use of excommunication as a political weapon demonstrates the complete secularization of spiritual authority under his papacy. You observe him threatening or implementing ecclesiastical penalties against rulers who oppose Borgia interests, effectively transforming religious sanctions into diplomatic pressure tactics. The practice reduces papal excommunication from divine judgment to political negotiation, fundamentally altering its meaning and effectiveness. Financial arrangements underlying Alexander's political activities reveal the economic foundations of Renaissance papal power. You witness him selling church offices, benefices, and indulgences to fund military campaigns and diplomatic initiatives that serve Borgia family interests rather than Christian spiritual needs. The Vatican's treasury functions more like a family bank account than an institutional religious fund. Historians still argue whether Alexander's political activities demonstrated strategic brilliance or reckless ambition, but you witness immediate results that transformed Italian political geography. His interventions in European conflicts created new power balances that affected international relations for decades, suggesting that his impact extended far beyond personal family advancement to encompass broader historical consequences. The diplomatic correspondence surrounding Alexander's papacy reveals fascinating insights into how European courts adapted their protocols to accommodate a pope who operated according to secular rather than spiritual principles. You observe ambassadors developing new vocabularies and procedures for dealing with papal policies that resembled royal court politics more than traditional church governance. The broader implications become apparent as you witness reactions across Christendom to a papacy that functioned as an instrument of family political advancement rather than spiritual leadership. Alexander's success in using papal authority for temporal purposes demonstrated the complete collapse of medieval distinctions between sacred and secular power, fundamentally altering European concepts of religious authority. The psychological portrait that emerges from observing Alexander's political activities reveals a man who viewed the papacy as the ultimate prize in a comprehensive power game, rather than a spiritual vocation requiring pastoral care for Christian souls. You witness him making decisions based entirely on political calculations, without apparent consideration for their religious implications or moral consequences. The network of alliances and betrayals that characterized Alexander's foreign policy creates a pattern of diplomatic opportunism that impressed contemporary observers while shocking traditional expectations about papal behavior. You observe him shifting allegiances based on changing circumstances rather than consistent principles, treating international relations like a business venture where loyalty was a commodity to be bought and sold. You're witnessing the dramatic collapse of Borgia power, beginning with Alexander the Sixth's sudden death on August 18, 1503, where the family's entire political structure crumbles faster than poorly constructed scaffolding once its papal foundation disappears. The scene unfolds with operatic tragedy as you observe how quickly Renaissance power built on personal relationships and institutional manipulation disintegrates when the central figure vanishes, leaving his children scrambling to preserve what remains of their extraordinary but temporary dominance. Alexander's final illness strikes with mysterious rapidity that fuels immediate speculation about poisoning, though historians remain divided on whether his death resulted from malaria, other natural causes, or deliberate murder. You witness the 72-year-old Pope declining rapidly during Rome's brutal August heat, his famous vitality finally succumbing to either disease or enemies who decided his continued existence threatened their own survival in the shifting landscape of Italian politics. The immediate aftermath reveals the fragility of power structures built around individual charisma rather than institutional foundations. You observe Caesar Borgia, despite his military reputation and territorial holdings, becoming immediately vulnerable once his father's papal protection disappears. His enemies, previously held in check by fear of papal retaliation, begin mobilizing almost before Alexander's body reaches its tomb. Caesar's attempt to maintain control demonstrates both his strategic intelligence and the impossibility of his situation. You witness him racing back to Rome despite his own serious illness, desperately trying to secure papal treasury funds and negotiate with cardinals who might support his continued influence. His efforts showcase remarkable political skill, undermined by the fundamental reality that his power derived entirely from family connections rather than legitimate authority. The papal election following Alexander's death becomes a referendum on Borgia influence in church hierarchy. You observe cardinals who had quietly accepted or actively supported Alexander's scandalous behavior now distancing themselves from anything associated with the Borgia name. The new pope, Pius III, lives only 26 days, but his brief papacy signals the College of Cardinals' determination to restore traditional papal dignity. Giulia Farnese's rapid departure from Rome illustrates how quickly Alexander's death dissolved the complex social arrangements surrounding his unconventional lifestyle. You witness her fleeing the city within days of the Pope's funeral, understanding immediately that her position as papal mistress provided no protection once her patron was buried. Her hasty escape demonstrates the precarious nature of power derived from romantic relationships rather than institutional position. The election of Giuliano Della Rover as Pope Julius II represents a complete repudiation of Borgia policies and personal style. You observe this new pontiff, who had been Alexander's bitter enemy, systematically dismantling everything the Borgias had built while pursuing vengeance against surviving family members with relentless determination. Julius II's papacy becomes a deliberate antithesis to Alexander's reign, emphasizing military conquest over diplomatic manipulation. Caesar's final downfall unfolds with tragic inevitability as he loses territorial holdings as rapidly as he had gained them. You witness former allies abandoning him, while enemies seize properties that had required years of military campaigning to acquire. His transformation from feared warlord to desperate refugee demonstrates how quickly Renaissance political fortune could reverse when fundamental circumstances changed. The broader Borgia family scatters across Europe seeking refuge and attempting to salvage what remains of their former influence. You observe Lucrezia adapting most successfully to changed circumstances, using her position as Duchess of Ferrara to maintain dignity and influence, while distancing herself from her family's scandalous reputation. Her survival strategy showcases remarkable resilience and political intelligence. Historians still argue whether the Borgia family's rapid downfall resulted from inevitable consequences of their excesses or specific political circumstances that might have been managed differently. You witness how their reliance on papal authority created fundamental vulnerability that more diversified power bases might have avoided, suggesting that their ultimate failure was strategic rather than merely moral. The psychological impact on surviving family members reveals the personal costs of living at the center of Renaissance power politics. You observe individuals who had wielded extraordinary influence suddenly finding themselves powerless and isolated, forced to reconstruct their identities after losing everything that had defined their previous existence. The immediate transformation of Rome following Alexander's death demonstrates how thoroughly the Borgia papacy had altered Vatican culture and operations. You witness rapid changes in personnel, policies, and social atmosphere as Julius II works to erase traces of his predecessor's revolutionary approach to papal authority and personal behavior. You're now contemplating the long-term historical consequences of Alexander VI's extraordinary papacy, where the reverberations of papal scandal continue influencing church history, European politics, and popular imagination more than 5 centuries after his death. The legacy unfolds in layers of complexity that make simple moral judgments impossible. This Spanish pope, who chose love over celibacy, fundamentally altered concepts of religious authority while providing ammunition for church critics that continues echoing through modern discussions of papal power and clerical behavior. The immediate impact on Catholic Church reforms becomes apparent as you observe how Alexander's scandals motivated the Counter-Reformation's emphasis on clerical discipline and papal dignity. His papacy served as a cautionary tale that influenced centuries of subsequent church policy, creating reactionary measures designed to prevent future papal families from treating the Vatican as their private enterprise. The irony strikes you. A pope who abandoned church traditions ultimately strengthened those traditions by demonstrating their importance through negative example. Protestant reformers weaponized Borgia papal scandals with devastating effectiveness, using Alexander's behavior as evidence for their arguments about Catholic corruption and the need for religious revolution. You witness how Martin Luther and other reformers cited papal mistresses and acknowledged children as proof that the Roman Church had betrayed Christ's teachings, making Alexander VI's personal choices into foundational arguments for Protestant separation from Catholic authority. Historical scholarship surrounding Alexander VI reveals fascinating evolution in how different eras interpreted his papacy based on their own cultural values and political needs. You observe medieval chroniclers emphasizing moral condemnation, Renaissance historians focusing on political achievement, Enlightenment scholars highlighting institutional corruption, and modern academics attempting more nuanced analysis that considers both personal choices and historical context. Alexander's influence on concepts of papal power extends beyond scandal to encompass significant changes in how the office functioned within European political systems. You witness his papacy demonstrating that popes could operate as secular rulers without losing institutional effectiveness, creating precedents that influenced subsequent papal involvement in temporal affairs. His success in using spiritual authority for political purposes permanently altered expectations about papal capabilities and limitations. The Borgia family's broader cultural impact transcends historical accuracy to encompass mythological status in popular imagination. You observe how their story has inspired countless works of literature, art, and entertainment that often prioritize dramatic effect over factual precision, creating a legendary version of their lives that competes with historical reality for public attention and influence. Historians still argue whether Alexander VI should be remembered primarily as a corrupt pope who damaged church credibility, or as an effective leader who successfully navigated complex political challenges while maintaining institutional power. You witness ongoing scholarly debates about whether his personal scandals overshadowed genuine administrative achievements that strengthened papal authority in some respects while undermining it in others. The psychological profile that emerges from studying Alexander's life reveals a man whose personal choices reflected broader tensions within Renaissance culture between Christian moral ideals and humanistic celebration of earthly pleasures. You observe how his papacy embodied contradictions that characterized an entire historical era, struggling to reconcile spiritual aspirations with material realities. The diplomatic consequences of Alexander's papacy influenced European international relations for decades after his death, as secular rulers adapted their approaches to papal authority based on their experiences with a pope who operated according to political rather than spiritual principles. You witness lasting changes in how monarchs related to Vatican diplomacy and ecclesiastical influence. A feminist historical perspective on Alexander's relationships with Vanosa de Catenay and Julia Farnese reveals important insights into women's agency and influence within patriarchal Renaissance society. You observe how these women navigated extraordinary circumstances to achieve power and independence that transcended typical feminine roles of their era, using their relationships with papal authority to create lasting social and economic advantages. The ecclesiastical reforms implemented in response to Borgia scandals demonstrate how institutional corruption can ultimately strengthen organizations by forcing necessary changes and creating clearer behavioral standards. You witness how Alexander's papacy inadvertently contributed to Catholic Church development by illustrating the importance of clerical discipline and spiritual focus that characterized subsequent papal reigns. As you settle deeper into contemplation of this extraordinary historical figure, the complexity of Alexander VI's legacy becomes increasingly apparent. He was simultaneously a devoted father and neglectful spiritual leader, a skilled politician and moral failure, a man who loved deeply and ruled ruthlessly. His story reminds us that history rarely provides simple heroes or villains, but rather complicated human beings whose choices created consequences that rippled through centuries of subsequent events. The gentle Roman breeze carries whispers of old scandals and ancient loves, while moonlight filters through Vatican windows that once witnessed scenes of papal passion and political intrigue. Alexander VI chose earthly love over celestial duty, family advancement over spiritual service, and personal happiness over institutional expectations. Whether that choice represents admirable humanity or inexcusable corruption depends largely on the values and priorities of whoever renders judgment. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, perhaps you'll dream of Renaissance Rome, where a Spanish pope danced until dawn with beautiful women, raised his children in papal palaces, and proved that even the supposed voice of God on earth remained fundamentally, irrepressibly, and scandalously human. The gentle whisper of history reminds us that love and ambition, passion and politics will always find ways to intertwine, regardless of the sacred vows that attempt to separate them. Rest well, knowing that even in the holiest of places, the human heart continues beating with all its beautiful, terrible, wonderfully complicated desires.